Sure you're not doing any texting or driving while holding the phone.
No, I am not. I have a chauffeur.
You have a chauffeur. Okay. All right.
Good thing, 'cause you just.
I don't know. Dan was going to call 911 and report you. That's all I know. Okay, great. Thanks for, sorry you're stuck in traffic, but we understand.
We're moving along pretty good now.
Are you? Okay. That's good.
That's nothing against you, though.
Understood. Well, thanks for joining by phone. We have an agenda in front of us. President's remarks, remarks from Bob Thompson, board discussion and decisions. It's a series of yay or nay votes. Proceed with project, renovate, yay or nay, interior only, exterior only, both, yay or nay, new build, yacht club, yay or nay. And then decide on the contractor. There's 4 contractors listed here, yay or nay. You have to decide on schedule of referendum if required, based on whatever recommendations we get from council. Public comment, media questions, and adjourn. Any changes or additions to the agenda?
Yeah, I have a question on the agenda.
Yes.
Basically, it's the order where you talk about renovation versus or new build, and then after that, the contractor. I kind of feel that those two should be reversed. That deciding whether or not we're going to go ahead with the rebuild, or recommend a rebuild, without knowing what it's going to be. I just don't get how to do that.
What Dave is suggesting is that we move 2 up to 1 and select the contractor first.
No, I would oppose that.
Mr. President and Dave, the point behind that order is the fact that Nason is only a bidder on a rebuild and not a bidder on the new building. There are only 3 of them on that list that are bidders on a new building. So deciding on whether to build new or to rebuild is essential before deciding on a builder.
So, Dan, would you feel it's fair to say that what we're deciding then is that we will not renovate?
No, not at all. The order is to decide whether to renovate or to build or to do neither, quite frankly, which is possible by everybody saying no to every one of those blocks. But once we have decided whether to renovate or to build, then we will have to pick from 4 contractors, only one of whom is a rebuild-only contractor, and that's Nason. They did not bid; they were not on our list for new builds. If you remember the list, Gillis, Gilkerson, Lehman, and Harkins are all 3 contestants to build a new building. Nason and Lehman are the only 2 there who are contestants for a rebuild project.
Okay. Pete?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You need to understand what the nature of the project is before you can decide which is the appropriate contractor you want to involve in it. So I think the order is correct.
Well, certainly you have to understand that we're talking about a rebuild. And then we could narrow down list of contractors, such as we had yesterday. But I'm not going to vote to rebuild until I know who the contractor is. I mean, that's, I don't even understand how you can do that. You can't say rebuild with if there's 3 contractors. I mean, maybe it's rebuild with one of the contractors, but don't do anything with the other. So that's just voting blind.
Terry?
I don't if some of the contractors are only bidding on one part of the project, depending upon what we vote for, then you can't choose the contractor until you know what you're building.
Well, I think you could say that given a choice of build or rebuild, that we could vote on which one of those 2 it is.
Well, that's what
To me, to a rebuild without committing to doing it.
That's correct.
Mr. President, I submit that we keep the agenda as distributed previously.
I'll second that.
Okay, the consensus is we'll leave but I now finally understand Dave's concerns, but I think we can work our way through them. Okay. Agenda is as is, President's remarks. Really don't have any at this point. We've got a lot to try to get through here today, major decisions. So I'm going to hold any remarks for myself at this point, and I will turn it over to Bob Thompson for any updates you want to supply to us before we move on to the rest of the agenda. And let me ask the question, can everybody hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Good. All right, first, welcome. I see some new faces, so thanks for everybody being out on a Friday afternoon. Really, we have a short, I've spoken to each of you, I think actually everybody, to include Mr. Stevens, either individually or in pairs, talk about the project since last week. So what I did was just put together, there's only 5 or 6 slides, recapping some of the information and trying to maybe clarify some things, and it's probably going to be more of a discussion amongst the board members when it boils down to it, the pros and cons of each, because the questions I had from each of you, I tried to share with the rest of you as the week went on. So what I'm going to do is just we've done a comparative analysis, basically putting the 3 builders together on a spreadsheet. It is by no means everything. What I tried to do is point out some of the bullet points, some of the biggest differences that maybe some of you didn't see or that someone else picked up, or some of the things we saw while we were going through the process. I'm also going to give you a revised timeline. Okay, that'd be the last thing we do. And I'm also, just before I do that, a funding solution. One of the things that came up from one of you was, funding to pay for this is very, very important. And although we've talked about it a lot, I didn't include it. Now, I didn't want this necessarily to be a funding, we talked about it so many times, the purpose of our meeting wasn't for funding, but I thought at least putting a slide there to make sure everyone was clear on where the funding for the project was potentially coming from. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Let's start with the, nay.
We have 2 choices, yay or nay, right? Dan?
Yeah, that's it.
All right, just a quick, yeah. Okay. Ted was going to be here with us. He's on his way. He's in the same traffic that Mr. Stevens is. So they may pass each other getting here. Some of the big differences, and they're in the slides, but I also put them up here. I didn't know how many people we'd have in the room, so I know it's a special board meeting, but I thought I'd throw it up there. Some of the things we pointed out last week when we spoke about it, and then some of the things that we reiterated in individual conversations that gave some differences between the 3 bidders when it came to new construction. Now, I know that you all, per the agenda, have to talk about the renovation and then go down to new construction. Everything we focused on was new construction because that was our recommendation. And quite frankly, we didn't get many questions from any of you about the renovation during the week. So our focus has been on new construction. If you have additional renovation questions once we're done with this, or if you'd like to start there, I can wait to go through this. It's up to you all. All right, we'll go through this then. What we did was, if you recall last week, we got down to 3 contractors of the group that had supplied information to us. And across the top, we've got Gillis, Lehman, and Harkins were the 3 we ended up with. So what we tried to do is pick out some things that we thought were important, either that we approached last week or that we had questions about from you guys over this week. Now, I will tell you this, and Ted's not here, but we're being recorded. So last week he kept saying, well, Bob, you mistake with that spelling error and this, that. I cut and pasted from his this time. So if there's any spelling, you can blame me. I'm on record saying that. I called him and said, it's on you this time. Something that was important to us, the building code. When we looked at the new structure, the new building, one of the big important things for us, knowing that when we're potentially starting the project, the codes are about to change, we need to make sure we built the building to the current, to the upcoming code. In the bid packages, when we went down the comparison, Lehman and Harkins had done that. The codes apparently for the Gillis contractor were the 2009 codes. Now keep in mind, Ted went and called and verified that with them. The code change does change some of the building process for us. Commissioning, which is something that it's a new requirement on the county, okay, that when the building goes into operation, it's called commissioning. There's a process that Gillis and Harkins did not have that in theirs because it's a new requirement. Lehman did include it, but as a budget option. And please understand, I didn't break them all down. They're in your book in the big spreadsheets. I just want to draw your attention to these. Permits and fees were not included in the Gillis project. They were included in the Lehman and Harkins project. Insurances were included with Gillis and Lehman. Insurance was, with the exception of builder's risk, we did add the builder's risk policy into the Harkins bid when we leveled them, but they were not included initially. Construction time, 12 months for Lehman and Harkins, 7 months for Gillis. Big difference there. 5 months is a big swing when you're talking about a $4 million project. Landscaping, several of you asked the question about it, so we just put it up front. We did not include the landscaping in the project. If you remember in some of the notes on the pages, some of the landscaping, we had a landscaping number that we did put in there for our total project cost, but they were not included with any of the bidders. Floor system. This was a question that was asked by several of you trying to understand what we were doing. There's a difference between slab. We are sitting right now in this building on a slab. Okay? It's a poured concrete slab. It's a slab of concrete directly on the ground versus most of your homes. If you think of your home and then you walk down your garage, most garages are on slab. Your home's elevated by a few feet due to the foundation. Okay? When you look through the actual bids, slab on grade, we didn't have we weren't sure at or what the above level of. We couldn't tell by the plans. When you looked at Lehman actually had a foundation. Okay, they weren't laid straight on slab with their initial bid, and then Harkins actually had it on a slab. So what we had to do, we did some price ups. If Lehman went to slab as opposed to the foundation, there would be a slight decrease in their price for the building. Doing a foundation is more expensive. There are pros and cons to each. For the leveling, we did not get into that. Any of the three contractors could do either, but for our leveling, this is what was included. Roof systems on all three, we pointed them out a little bit, and you can look at the plans, and I know that we went over these before, but there were some big differences in the roof systems. I know on the TV, Dave, you won't be able to see this right away, but we'll switch back. But just some things I wanted to make sure everyone saw. There were some significant differences in the roofing systems when you looked at the drawings. Okay? And we listed what they were, broken down a little further on here. But basically, standing seam roof, 50-year shingles was on Gillis. 24-gauge standing seam, okay, right over here with Lehman. And then 27-gauge standing seam, 50-year, over here with Harkins. Harkins actually had a unique combination, some shingles, and they had more architectural design in their roofing, if you looked at the three. But it does make a big difference when you're trying to level all these. Exterior wall coverings, also a big difference when you look at the three designs. Gillis basically had siding. When you looked at Lehman and Harkins, they had a combination of a stone and siding mix. Okay? Again, draw some very big distinctions, and that's where some of the pricing differential would have come in. Questions about that slide? Vaulted ceilings. Harkins and Lehman had vaulted ceilings on the second floor. They were included in their bid price. Gillis did not. Gillis had a flat roof, so they didn't offer the vaulted ceiling, as did Harkins and Lehman. They had a 20-foot to the center, highest point on the second floor as the vaulted ceiling inside. Again, these are just some of the differences. I was asked where were the biggest differences in the price, and so we could see where the pricing. Now, please understand, when we're trying to level the bids, and you start looking at some of these, and they're talking about why is it, from a $3.5 to a $4.2 million, $700,000 spread, you can start to see where some of these are coming in. Okay, some of the biggest differences. We can plus up or down, plus down with Harkins and Lehman as an example, or plus up with Gillis if we wanted to try to get those more on point. Dormers, you can see the differences here, here, okay? I don't want to pretend to say one's better than the other. One's a little bigger. Lehman's were bigger. Harkins were a little bit smaller. Harkins had a little different design to them. That's more aesthetic, but the pricing wasn't included in their bid for those. Air energy locks. Okay, this one was
I don't even claim to know what that is. So
what, a dormer or a?
I know what a dormer is.
Oh.
The airlocks energy code.
Yeah, what happens is the new codes with the way the doors seal to hold the energy in, how the door seals locks it in. And again, I'm not a contractor, but this, as we went through these. The Gillis bid did not include the new energy efficient doors, which actually seal, when they shut, they're fully sealed. Harkins and Lehman did.
I get what it is. Okay.
Just more energy efficiency. Restrooms, and when we looked at, and please understand, we went over these before, so I'm just kind of racing through the bullet points, and you can go in and look at these. First floor restrooms, we had, Gillis included 2 water closets, 2 urinals in the men's room, 4 water closets, 4 lavatories in the women's. 2, 5, 7, and 6 on Lehman, 2, 2, 4, and 4. Okay, so Lehman actually had the best, we felt the best design when it came to water closet, urinal. The bathroom layout was preferable when you compare it here to, with the other 2. Same with the second floor.
Is the actual square footage similar, so they could be swapped if we wanted?
Square footage was slightly larger on the Lehman one.
Okay, all right.
Now keep in mind, one of the things, what I'm trying to point out the differences here is so everyone is very, very clear why the pricing ranges were where they were. And when you start to looking at some of the differences between the 3, here are some things that came out. Okay, we in our recommendation, and then what we'll talk about as we get through this a little bit, our proposal will be we like elements in each. And when we nail down the final contractor, we'll pull elements from whichever contractor we did like or did not, and we'll get the best design from there. Did you have a question?
No, I was just going to comment that my understanding is that that's exactly what will happen. Once we select the preferred contractor, you will then take elements from this and that, and you'll refine the plan according to the
Fine design.
Yeah,
Yes.
fine.
And many of you that came in the office to look at the plans up close over this past week, starting last weekend, and come in and look up close, so you could see, we pointed out the differences.
Right.
But for the presentation, I just wanted to make sure we just kind of gave a quick overview on it.
And that'll have an implication of cost too. It could either be greater or lesser than what. Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
And just so, I don't know when you, with my
Yeah.
traveling, I was the last one to get back to talk to you about this, so I'll share with the rest of the board the 2 issues I raised, the most important one of which was that there needs to be a staff room of some kind with lockers and things like that And the question that I asked was, is there enough space in all three of these designs to where that kind of room could be created? Because we don't want people throwing coats all over the place in a brand new facility. If we do a brand new one, and in fact, if we remodel, I still think we need a staff area so that they have a place to put things and go eat and all that kind of stuff. But I did raise that, and the answer was there is room for it. So, just so everybody knows.
There were a number of those pieces that each of you brought to the table with your Q&A, design differences or things we ought to consider, and the layout gives us that flexibility. Big one here, the electric service, 600 amp, 800 amp, 1200 amp. Almost double the size with the Harkins bid. Okay, I say that it's important with a facility of this size. If you have multiple functions, if you have a band playing upstairs and something else going on downstairs, the larger electrical service we thought was a good. We like that in the bid. But big difference between 600, 800, and 1200. Just some things to point out. These were some of the cost differences. We're trying to figure out why the range. I actually had folks in the community call me, wow, that's, between the 4.2 and 3.5, there's a big range. I'm pointing out some of the biggest differences. You can bring you could bring Harkins down by lowering the amp service to 800, or Gillis up by raising it to 800. Or we could say we want 12 and bring Gillis and Lehman up. So, there's a way, that's part of what we'll do when we tighten up with the builder. But I'm trying to point out the differences, why the pricing differences, where the biggest things we saw. First floor layout, we liked the Lehman contractor, the flow on the first floor. We liked the design. However, it did create some, the connection to the bar is a concern. So we have to, if we go with Lehman, we have to tighten that up. Harkins, on the other hand, we like the design of we like the, the bar's connected. What they had was better storage and some other spacing in their kitchen that we like better. Again, these are things that when we tighten up with either of the builders that we end up with, we'll take the best elements and come up with the end product. Let's just see if anybody was watching. Okay, this is, and can you all see, I don't know if the computer, is that high enough for everybody to see? This is a big one. I want to make sure I point this out. Okay, it's on the bottom of your screen, but this is a huge difference. We talked about the elevations already. Okay, there are blanks in there. So we already talked about that. Elevation being what the building looks like, the dormers, the layout, those type of things. The A&E cost, architectural and engineering cost. This is where we found to be the biggest difference out of the gate was. $140,000, $60,000, $172. Okay, now, where this makes a difference, and this is something you all really need to look at and consider, okay, is at the 70 or at the 172 versus 60. I'm taking the very high and very low. Both Gillis at 140, Gillis at 140, 172 for Harkins, both are going to outside architects and engineers for their design. Lehman is in-house. Okay, that is where a huge difference between the three contractors are. That's going to be a decision that you all are going to have to, in your processes, and we talked about this week, but that's what you all collectively are going to be making a big decision on today. Because that drove a big part of our decision making with last week's recommendation, the upfront costs. Now, if you go with Gillis or with Harkins, okay, at the higher amounts, okay, bless you, compare that to the 60 with Lehman, understand that money is spent prior to knowing the referendum results. Everybody understands that, right? I know we talked about that in our individual meetings, but I just want to make sure everybody sees that. Now, there are some advantages or disadvantages of both. You all can talk about now, you can ask now, you can talk about however you want to do it, but that's a big one for me. That was a big difference. I just want to make sure I pointed that out. All right, that was the side-by-side. You have that in your slides, okay? They're all through your book. There are many other things in there, but they were kind of the bigger ones that I want to point out. And like I said, some of it, you know which ones you brought up individually. You recognize them on there. That puts them all together so everybody else can see what you all brought up. Okay, funding. Okay, just want to cover, I told you I only had 5 slides. So funding was one I did want to bring up, and how I've talked with many residents lately, over the last week, and they're like, are you sure we have money? That's a big, $4 million is a big amount of money. I agree, completely. How we're going to fund the project was determined several years ago. The board 4 years ago put in place the 5-year funding plan. The 5-year funding strategy was to focus on our major structures. A plan was put in place to take an X amount of money a year, put it aside in the 5-year funding component of the reserve bucket that would be used for our major infrastructure. So I thought, well, okay, we talk about it. I know Pete Gomsak is going over it at length. I tried to get him off of all the technical terms, and we talked F-150, F-250, and backhoe, I think, in the budget last year. Just make it real terms instead of technical terms. What I wanted to just point out to you all is the actual numbers, because 2 of you asked me about this week in more detail. Balance as of May 1st, 2012, okay, $1,350,000. 5-year funding plan, side of the slide, okay? It's in, you all just got your month-end report with the numbers. Second to last page shows the chart that includes that. Numbers get thrown around. There's 7 million, there's 6 million, we have 4 million. I'm giving you, this is the bucket or pot of money to cover the major facilities. Okay, if you follow your 5-year funding plan out, you get here after your slides are finished, Ted. Thank you. Yeah, come up here. That way, if I get fired on, you get some collateral damage. Okay. Assuming that we have the increase, the monies in the budget, okay, we add another, with the $26 assessment increase, we add another $1,100,000 next year. By the end of the year, that's in the budget. Okay? Carry the plan out for the next 2 years. And the reason I say carry it out, we're not increasing, it levels off. There's no additional increase. And this is what I think where the confusion part comes out with folks. Well, this $30 increase or whatever it's going to be, the 5-year funding plan component of it, which is 26, it goes into this bucket or into this, I like to think of it as a savings account for our structures, okay? It continues to fund that in the future. That's how it was designed when the board set off 4 years ago to do it. And if you recall, and I'll just give just a quick history on this because I think it was important to know, which led us up to it. In 2006, there was a decision of a $103 increase. The next year, when a new board came in, they got rid of that and said no increase. The effect was that money aside for reserve component for these type of things immediately lost it all. Then the board made a decision to move forward with 5-year funding solution and start funding this account to pay for these major projects. So, by the end of 2015, by the end of that fiscal year, we're going to have $4.6 million using that solution with no additional increases. So folks have been asking me, how are we going to pay for it? We're going to have a big, no, there's not. It's already built in. So I just wanted to dispel any of that confusion.
And the result of this is we end up basically borrowing money from ourselves in the interim until all that money comes in, right?
Yes. All right. So everybody understands. We, in addition to what we have in there, and then by May of next year, okay, we're at 2.5 approximately. Okay, the additional funding that we can draw from, okay, to pay for this structure, this part of our process, can come out of our overall funding that we have as an association. And Pete, what's the right, I don't want to say the wrong bucket. What would be the right bucket? That way no one quotes me.
From which we're going to borrow?
Yes,
It's called the historical component of the replacement reserve fund.
historical component. So it's out of our
That's the
replacement
depreciation
reserve.
component, the first column, yes.
I just didn't want to say it wrong. Last time I said it wrong, you were on me, so I remember that, so.
Sorry.
Okay. But we take from that and we are replenishing with the dollar amounts, and we're not having a significant increase. We're not having a one-time assessment. So you all have already approved and built in the funding solution. And folks here know it, but I don't think our membership quite understood it. So I thought maybe putting it this way may be helpful.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
In response, in partial response to Tom's question too about borrowing, just as happened here at the community center, this cost about $1,750,000, but it wasn't paid for in a single fiscal year. It was paid for over 2 fiscal years. Same thing here. We won't write a check for the whole cost of this. It'll be as construction occurs and a final payment. So it will be over several years that we will pay the actual cost of whatever this project is. So don't think all the costs are going to fall into a single fiscal year, okay?
But we have the money.
We will have the money.
We have money now.
We have the money ourselves in the bank without borrowing it, to borrow from ourselves, as Tom's
That was my
question raised.
And the
Absolutely.
replenishment into the
Yes.
account
Yes.
is already built in.
Yep.
So I just wanted to point that out. A lot of people have been asking me that. I thought it was appropriate to share it.
Good. Okay.
Okay, funding solution now. Yes, sir. Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
you had a question?
Well, no.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now, the other thing is I want to make sure with these numbers, there's a little note down here for those in the back that may not be able to see. I rounded the numbers off a little bit. It's not exact. You know, this one ends in a 999. I just didn't do that. I just gave round numbers. So if you look at your financial statements, they get a little exact numbers. I just didn't do it. Yeah, this number, as an example, is as of that is $1,347,999. I just did round numbers.
Close enough.
Okay. I don't want anybody to think I was misleading. Yes, sir.
I think it's also going to be critical that when this referendum goes out, a simple explanation of how it's going to be paid for should be one part of that referendum.
Assuming you all make a decision to move forward today, I completely agree with you, sir.
I'll say when and if.
Thank you. Okay. Some other things I just wanted to point out, and Mr. Reynolds asked me about this at the end of the last meeting. I wanted to make sure I did a research and got the answer out there. Project costs exclude furniture and fixtures. Okay, take equipment out. I didn't pull it off when I first typed it up. Equipment is included. But furniture and fixtures are not included in the project cost right now. Everybody understand that? They are a component of replacement reserves. Let me make sure I clarify that, and we'll continue to do it over the next few weeks or so. But furniture is an item that's part of our replacement funding. Okay, we put through our depreciation schedule, we put a certain amount. When we buy a piece of equipment, i.e. furniture, we start putting, based on the cost of that equipment, a portion amount based on the life expectancy of that item, put it back into, hence the reserve replacement or this savings account, okay, as the depreciation. It starts dumping in there. At some point, we are going to replace furniture at the yacht club. Forget any of this today. We're going to replace it. So we've already depreciated, put some money aside to do so. So I want to make sure that I've covered that. I want everyone to know we are considering it, but it's not part of the cost of the construction because it's out of a separate bucket. But we will make sure everyone's aware of the fact that that additional cost, we will, in my opinion, accelerate the purchase. Okay, now we're replacing furniture all the time, but we would accelerate by maybe a year, 2 at the max. We have furniture we need to replace anyway. New building, we'll probably want to put the new furniture in. Yes, 2 hands, Mr. Wentworth?
Can we assume that the new furniture that has been bought in the last year and a half would be moving over?
The couches, yes.
And the outside.
Oh, yeah, the deck furniture, absolutely, yes, absolutely. It's more, the things that we'll need to replace are the hard tables and chairs inside, and we need to start looking at that anyway. We have, in the depreciation, I look back at the budget, approximately, and Pete, you can jump on me if I'm wrong on this, $500,000?
That's 600,000.
600,000. I went back and looked at the budget that was approved and how much we had set aside, about 600,000 for furniture fixtures already in the depreciation.
Depreciation will be,
Okay? So, yes, sir.
in terms of the referendum, as Ray suggested earlier, this will be disclosed. The intention is to disclose this in the
Yes.
referendum. It's not part of the referendum because the referendum is involved in a construction project, but full disclosure says we're also going to have to do this and here's how much it is, right?
And understand, once we decide, we get the drawing where we say, yes, we all agree this is what we want to build, we'll then know how many tables and chairs are going to fit in there. Right now, we haven't finalized what the design is. Hard to say how many tables and chairs we're going to put in there. That's part of the next step. But I just want to make sure I point it out. I'm trying to make sure I include everything. I don't want anybody to have surprises. And Mr. Reynolds, thanks for pointing that out last week because it had me go back and do the research so I knew where we were on it. You're welcome. Okay, funding is dependent on the board's, please understand the funding component that I laid out a slide ago is dependent upon this board and our future boards continuing with that planning. If a board decides to change direction, 06 to 07, or they change direction, they could wipe all these funds out. So we stay on the path that we're on, as we have been for 4 years. We have slow, steady increases to pay for the structural issues that we're having. I don't control it. Just pointing it out. Okay, timeline. And I'm sorry for the folks in the back where it's small. I was trying to put it all on one page.
Why don't we come back to this, Bob, after we do the rest of this?
You want to do the timeline last?
Is this the last
Sure.
slide? Is this the last slide?
Yes.
It's the last slide.
We'll
Okay.
Want to come back to it? Okay.
come back to it.
That's where I am with the,
Any questions of Bob from anybody at this point?
I'll be here in case you have.
Yeah, you'll be here. Okay. All right. Open discussion, any comments, concerns before I move into the decision process? Okay, Ray.
Bill, you got your hand up first.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Bob, if I remember correctly, last Friday, based on the upfront design cost that we would have to show out, and those funds were you're retrievable, correct?
We would spend the money.
Money,
yes.
right.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Your recommendation, again, correct me if I'm wrong, was Lehman based on their $60,000 design cost versus $172,000 design cost for her, right?
Well, let me clarify. Last week we talked about the two, our recommendation in order, Lehman, Harkins, Gillis.
Right. Okay.
Lehman and Harkins were very close.
Right.
One of the determining factors that were considered was the upfront cost.
Right.
That is correct.
Okay.
It was strongly considered.
Okay. Got it. So as I look at this, look at my numbers, the difference between the bid price between Harkin and Lehman is $290,961. Difference between the cost of the design is $112,000. So when you add that 112 into the bid price, we're talking about a difference of $402,961.
No,
No,
12.
subtract.
Part of the up.
It's part of that
number.
upfront.
It's part of it.
Okay. Okay.
Good question. Yeah, but it goes the other way. Subtract.
Okay. Now, I'm not a construction engineer or a structural engineer. I don't have any expertise in that area. I don't know anything about the quality of products, the pipes, the food, the floor, the wiring, whatever. Depending on the expertise that was afforded to us by Ted Maroney and by Eddie Wells, who got a lot of experience in those areas. But I do have obviously expertise in adding, subtracting, multiplication, division, using logic, reasoning, common sense. I can do that. Do we want to make a decision based on what might or might not pass a referendum, or do we want to make a decision based on what we think is best? If the referendum is important because of the concern for losing irretrievable money, then do we want to do a referendum before we decide what's going on? There are my questions out there.
All right, if I can clarify. First, we can't do a referendum until we spend some money, because we can't take a concept, referendum guidelines. The board has to send to the membership what it intends for them to vote on, what the building structure is going to be. And Dan, you can jump in here. I mean, you've been through these. Accurate when I say that, correct?
Well, absolutely. The problem, what we're doing today is deciding what we're going to do with this project and who's going to do it. However, we haven't decided exactly what the project is, nor will we until we're ready to put it out for referendum, because that's the process from today until the time that we have, and it includes comments in a public forum, so everyone has a chance to talk about what's going into this before we actually call it a finished product. And the same way, and this is what's important, Bill, the same applies to the pricing. Whatever we change conceptually at this point in time has an effect on what the final price is. It's, I think, crucial that the board goes out with, here's the hard design, and here's the hard price. This is what you get, and this is how much you pay for it.
I think
But to get there, you've got to have engineers, architects working on it, and they don't work for free.
Yeah, you have to have the exact number within. You have to know what it is you're doing before you go out there with the design that's finalized, and that costs money to do that. I would also add that part of that differentiation, having worked in industries where the design folks reported into the engineering department versus having a design team that is somewhat free to design the right solution, you sometimes get a better solution out of a design team that is able to work with their own creativity to get you the right product at the end, so that they're not bound by what it is the engineers and construction people want to build. So there is some advantage to having a somewhat separated design team working with your engineers and your construction people. There is some advantage to that.
Can I give you the other side of that?
Sure.
I worked for a civil engineer for a few years, and we did a lot of these. We actually had our architects, our surveyors, our designers, and everybody else all in one area. And while, in my experience, they didn't have any trouble with having the freedom to do that, but it was so easy if someone contacted the surveyor and they needed to do something. The surveyor walked right over to the architect, and the architect changed it, and then they took it to the design guys. And it was so much easier to work with a group that was all in one area.
My experience is the exact opposite. You end up with a design that, in essence, you didn't even have a design team. You had an engineer doing it. So we just have
Something you have to look at.
Ray, you had your hand up. Sorry.
There's probably nobody at the table that spends more time at the yacht club than me. In the last 10 years.
I'll give you that trophy.
Yeah.
In the morning and the evening.
And therefore,
I've gotten to know the building, the structure, everything that's gone in it, the money that's been put in it, and why. Gotten to know the people that have worked there over the years. Remember the time, it's only been 5 years since we stopped the kids from going up to the crow's nest because all the decking and steps and everything was dangerous. We take a look at all of the work and looking at that building and studying of it over the last year to see exactly what's going to be done. We've spent $1.5 million or so in the last 10 years, and look at the condition today. We have to spend another $1.5 million to get it to simply be safe for a few more years of use before some other board might have to sit down and make this decision. I've been kind of up in the air and down on it thing. As far as I'm concerned, it makes a lot more sense to fix it right now, to replace the structure, and to do it in the most equitable way that we can. Because there's too many people that are depending on it.
Okay. Any other questions, comments before I move to the decision part? Yes, Pete.
A question was asked by Phil about the upfront costs, and I think we all realize that we acknowledge we have to spend money in order to take the proper amount of information to the public, to the membership, right? But the fact that we invest that money, even if the referendum were to be unsuccessful, I believe there still may be tremendous benefit in those expenditures. You don't just throw them away. If, for example, the consequence of a, God forbid, a negative vote by the membership, then that board would have to decide what to do. One of the possibilities it would decide to do is to wait a year. Get better this, better that, refine the plan, more information, so forth. I know. I don't want to wait either. But in that instance, that investment that we've already made is not worthless. It still has value to the organization, either in whole or in part. So it doesn't become worthless upon a no vote. That's the only thing I wanted to make a point of.
Any other questions, comments?
Well, something to that. If I may.
Sure, Dave, go ahead.
Yeah. I think I also think, am I getting through this?
Not really, you're breaking up a bit.
Dave.
Keep trying.
Keep trying.
Okay. I also believe, well, first of all, I'm very, given the choice of referendum or the choice of rebuilding it and major, whatever.
Renovation.
Renovation. Lost the word, sorry. But if it's, given the numbers, I think we're at a point where the only consideration is rebuilding. I still have a concern about that, but I would say this, that if we're going to do that, I would not recommend anything that was what I thought best designed product that we could get. And the difference between or the worry, the concern about losing another $100,000, whatever that difference is like 2% of the total form of what we're doing. If we can't put that much at risk, we shouldn't even think about going to referendum.
Yeah, the percentage you're referring to, Dave, is 2.8% to be exact, and you're right.
And Dave, we did hear you loud and clear.
We heard you.
And I'd like to say I absolutely echo what you said.
Anything else? Dave, go ahead. Okay, I'm going to move on to, I don't see any hands up.
Yeah, I had a hand up.
Yeah,
I
right
didn't
ahead.
realize-
It's hard to see with
I know. I
people
didn't
to my
realize.
left and right.
I wanted to put my hand up. Just to clarify, Harkins has their engineers, they're outside. Lehman has an engineer, an interior designer, a lead designer, and then somebody that does all the CAD work, construction coordinator, who is also an engineer and a designer, and an architect. So just so you know, and that's the internal.
Right,
Okay.
right. Okay, going to go down this list here, and the first decision point, as we'll call it, is to renovate, yes or no. So I'm going to make it a positive statement to say we should renovate versus rebuild and call the vote on that question. Is everybody clear? Okay?
Yes.
So this is a vote if you vote for this, you are voting for renovation. If you vote against it, you're voting against renovation.
May I ask a question, Tom? That's clear enough.
Okay.
And I'm happy with that. Just to be clearer, if I can, we're voting for or against renovation. We're doing it on the basis of the numbers and the bids that we have in front of us.
That's
Right,
correct.
right.
That is correct. That's a good clarification, Dave. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor of renovation, please raise your hand. Dave, I can't see your hands. Is it down or up?
It's down.
Okay, although therefore renovation is rejected.
I'm telling you to do something.
The answer from this side, you can't see it. Zero hands are up.
Zero hands went
Zero
up.
hands are up here. And so it's a 7-0 rejection of that.
So now the next question becomes, do we build a new yacht club or do we say no to that as well? Because we have to decide that. So the motion on the table will be, do we build a new yacht club, again, based on the bids and the information available to us today? All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed?
Dave, there's
Dave,
6
was
hands
your hand
up.
up?
Yeah, well, I raised the same question I did at the very beginning. My hand will be yes or no, depending upon the contract.
Okay.
It'll be a resounding no in one case.
Okay.
And we'll be-
For right now, I'm going to make up an interesting way of handling this. This vote's either going to be a 6-1 or 7-0, and we're going to give Mr. Stevens the option of changing his vote later if we need to. We need to move on to make a decision here.
That's fair enough.
Is that fair? I mean, otherwise we'll be in a circle and not be able
So
to
you
get
want
out.
to delay your vote on this, Dave?
No, he's not doing that.
So,
I
Okay.
don't get it.
For the record.
Don't worry about it.
yeah,
What, I need to, because we
need-
record this.
I'll make
For
it
the
very-
record, what was the vote?
For the record, right now, we have a 6-0-1. We have an abstention in essence.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what we have. We have an
I
abstention.
agree that we have that.
That's what we have.
Yeah.
I would like to question Dave for a moment. Dave? Pete, I'm sorry. This is going to be reported as either a 6-0-1 abstention or a 7-0, unless, are you intending to revisit this? I don't know, are we going to re-vote on this later?
When we pick
Well,
the
revisit
contract.
it.
Okay, fine, I'm done, fine.
I'm simply
Just a little
giving-
confusing
I'm
to
just
me.
trying to work through the issue
Okay.
Dave had, and I don't have to win every argument on the planet. I'm okay.
Okay.
Just gets worked through it. All right. We now have a series of builders. Yay or nay?
Mr.
Again,
President?
yes,
point-
sir.
Point of order,
Yeah.
we elected not to renovate, therefore you can strike Builder A, Mason.
Mason it up.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. That leaves us with 3 options. Again, all of these 3 are based on the information we have in hand. Gillis, Lehman, and Harkins. All those in favor of Gillis, please raise your hand.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
In
you.
favor of Gillis,
Oh.
raise your hand.
Flavor of
Hands
bills.
is down.
Your hand is down. Gillis got 0. All those in favor of Lehman. Dave, where's your hand?
Down.
All those in favor of Harkins. Where's your hand, Dave?
It's up.
7 hands up,
Okay,
Dave.
Dave, I'd like to revisit. Do you want to change your position on the original?
Yes, I'll support the yacht club. I'll rebuild with Parkinson.
There you go.
There you go.
All right.
Thank you.
Now, thank you all very much. Been a lot of work and a lot of trees got killed and a lot of reading. I got all kinds of notes here like everybody else did.
Mr. President, pardon me, sir, just a point of order for clarification therefore, for the record.
Yeah.
The board has voted unanimously to build a new yacht club and voted unanimously to use Harkins as the supplier for that project. Am I correct in that summary?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Correct.
I was about to say that, but okay. Yes,
Um,
yes, Pete.
I got to write
Is
minutes.
that our
You
last-
got to write minutes. Right.
Other than timing, which you wanted to revisit,
Timing
right?
is next, yes.
I know the intent here was to have yay or nay. On the other hand, perhaps we need something a little more formal for the purposes of the record. And what I have in mind is something I just scribbled out here in the last few minutes. If I may just read it to see if it might be
A formal motion to
a formal motion.
constitute what we just did.
Yeah, let me just put it this way. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors authorizes and directs the general manager to enter into contract negotiations with Harkin Contracting, Inc. to serve as the association's prime contractor to perform the Yacht Club rebuild project. Such contract is subject to approval of the membership through a referendum process as well as board approval.
Any questions?
Yes, well, I need to get a second before we go anywhere. Do I have a second on this?
It formalizes.
I'll second
No, Bill. Bill seconded it for discussion. Dave, your question.
I mean, it is a good, Pete brings up a good point. The difficulty, again, okay, it says subject to referendum, but we are going to have to commit to a certain level of funding to do the design work, and that seems to me to be the first order of business.
We can't just be kept, Dave, I agree with you, thank you for that support. We just can't be entering into negotiations and so forth without, I think, in my mind, a more formal embracing of what it is we're doing here, instead of just a yay, nay.
So his point was we need to authorize some money.
We do, although not, this doesn't contemplate that. Here's what I contemplate, and I, like many of you, had conversation during this week with both the general manager, and I reached out to Ted Maroney as well. And Ted, if I understand it correctly, and Bob, the next steps would be, having approved what we did so far, that you would then go back to Harkins and say, you're the choice of the board. We want now to enter into discussions and negotiations. And you're going to affect various things that are going to change the price, and you'll come back to us, my understanding, tell me if I'm wrong, and you're not going to spend that money right now, but if you need to, let us know. The intent here is not to authorize the expenditure of a couple $100,000 or something, or 240, whatever the number is. It is to allow you to proceed. Now, we can do that separately or add it to this if money expenditure is needed at this juncture. Authorization of money expenditure is needed at this juncture. I can modify it.
Let Ted and Bob answer that. Go ahead.
If I may, Pete, last week when we reviewed this package and when the general manager presented it along with Ted, or when Ted presented it along with the general manager, whichever way you want to look at it, I thought it was quite clear in their presentation that, in fact, if we were to choose a contractor to move forward, we were authorizing the Phase A design part of that project at that vote, and we have done that.
Yeah,
So,
that's fine.
I think that the reason that you didn't hear a second from me on your motion, I understand the thrust of your motion, but I think we've already made that decision. I think that's done.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. There's a contract
May I?
that's going in here, Dan.
Yeah.
Sir,
Have a contract with anybody.
we will this afternoon. We may this afternoon.
Yeah, we won't have a contract this afternoon.
All right.
Sir?
We will not have a,
I think we want to hold off on this. We know where we're going. It's important to start the work today, this weekend, if they really want to get the jump on it, with not risk. But on the other hand, we do need to, cross the T's, dot the I's.
We do.
Okay, I'm gonna, Pete, your motion is there, it's been seconded. I think the discussion has led itself to where you need to add some authorization of money. I don't think anybody sitting at this table thought they were voting for something that they weren't gonna have to go then spend money on.
Agree.
So add something.
Let me add a
to the
sentence, Dan.
dollars.
Bob
All right.
would like to
Because that's my
add-
intent as well, okay?
Bob has something to
Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
go ahead. We would recommend that the addition would be not to exceed
Right.
That's fine.
the 172,000 proposed. And that really puts the cap on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me add this sentence and see if this works, Dan, because I'm absolutely 100% where you are. This resolution authorizes expenditures not to exceed $175,000. Dan?
Fine with me.
Okay with that?
Yeah.
So I would amend the motion to add that last sentence.
We'll have you withdraw the first one, you just put this one back up there. Somebody else want to second this?
The amended motion.
Ray seconded it, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Dave?
I have a problem with it, I'm sorry. I mean, it's not much of a problem, but, no, I still need, there's a contract missing, is what I'm saying. And I don't see how you can vote on expenditures without having a contract. So I'll vote no.
Okay, fair enough.
But we are authorizing by a vote of
Yes, we
6
are.
to 1,
Yes,
proceeding
we are.
and spending money to get what we need to get, right?
Correct.
Okay?
Yeah.
He's got.
Yes, Rick?
Tell Marcus we need more urinals.
I want,
No, I think it's just fine the way it is.
Dan, make sure that makes it into the minutes of the meeting.
Yes, sir, I will.
Okay, that's important. All right,
I don't think so.
now let's get to the calendar, Robert. You know what?
Yeah, can we get back to your slide, because I forgot my glasses, I can't read the one you gave me.
I have a handout for you, sir.
No, I'm trying to read this handout, and
Oh, what do you want me to back up?
my age is showing, yeah, if you put it up there.
You can't read it on here.
Back up to the timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have a
right.
handout.
Oh, big, yes, a big
A
hand.
big one. Oh, okay.
You got old people.
Thompson, all these handouts you're putting out to the people, put on the website so that
We
Leon can see it also.
Well, we do after every meeting. We will. And the presentation will be up afterwards as well, which has the same information. I know it's hard to see in the back, so. All right, here's our timeline moving forward. All right, we've covered, you notice before June, we didn't change that. We already created, we showed you, if you all remember last week, the blue handout.
Just start.
All right, skipping the first two, starting today, we had our board meetings, so now we're moving forward with Harkins. The next thing is we need to immediately mail out, and I say immediately, we need to formalize this, where we mail out a notice to our membership. We have a 15-day window advising them of when the public hearing will be. Our recommendation, based on today's approval, okay, will be that we do the public hearing on 21 July. That's a Saturday, 9 a.m. here. We pick the weekend, okay? We're more than 15 days out, and it will allow those members who are not local to come down for the weekend so they can participate. The eligibility deadline that I have on there is, it happens, I use the same deadline that I used or I used the same one that the elections committee is using for the referendum, or for the ballots for the board member election. We are going to immediately start working with the contractor. I have a 9 July date, meet with contractor, finalizing scope and price. We'll be calling them this afternoon, depending on what time you finished. Okay? Special board meeting, and we may, this is a timeline, we may end up putting another one in here, but right now we're saying 18 July. That gives us time to finalize. We may call, ask you at a different time if we want to get together when we get some updates.
That's so that whatever is presented at the public hearing is what we have
Correct.
officially said.
This is at a minimum.
Yeah.
You need to know a few days in advance in case you disagree with what we're about to roll out to the public hearing. We may have something prior to that. If we, as a group, I know individually I collected a lot of information this week, so we'll be going back and forth, but if we decide as a group to get together, it will be before the 18th July. But that's going to be up to you all. We'll keep you updated over the next couple of weeks of the progress, because this is a big project.
Right. Do you have enough time between 18 July and 21 July to allow the contractor to make any changes that come out of the 18 July meeting?
We think we do, and Ted, please jump in. We have 3 weeks here.
No, I'm talking about 3 days.
No, I understand. We have 3 weeks up to that point.
Right.
To take the pieces of, we've already heard a lot this week, and we'll start making those changes on the drawings. And we feel by the time we get to that 18 July, we will have had input from you all, either individually or have another meeting, so we can tighten that up pretty good. It's just so if we're meeting, you come in to see me tomorrow, Bill's in the next day, we then have a few extra, we can get together as a group to say, hey, here's the tightened up piece. So yes, And they would, Ted, correct me if I'm wrong.
You're talking about between the public hearing and...
No, the 18,
No.
between 18 July and 21 July.
18 July, we're going to have a special board meeting, and my understanding is that we would, at that point, the
Approved.
board would be approving the drawings
Yeah, and I think that,
or making final modifications
My
for
suggestion-
the public hearing.
yeah, my suggestion would be to have the contractor sitting in on that.
All right.
That way, maybe, that gives you a shot to talk about everything, and then the contractor also sits in on the 21 at the public hearing.
Yeah.
Run through it, and then after that public hearing, you just kind of have a short confab and say, okay, hey, this is a good point, this is a good point. Fix it, get back to us Monday with what the cost ramifications are. So yeah, I think we can do that quickly, so.
Thank you.
Okay, then the following Monday, we begin any modifications as needed. Then we have about a week built in there where we can do any modifications, start finalizing the materials. August 1st, finalize referendum ballot materials. After that week, a little more than a week. And then mail them out on the 10th. Okay, ballots due back on Thursday the 6th and counted on the 7th.
Thank you.
I have something, Tom.
Sure.
Yes. We're actually approaching Ocean Pond, so I can still make the meeting. But in lieu of that, would you please, any materials at all that were handed out, could you leave in a place where I can pick them up before the weekend?
Yes.
Yes, they'll be in your
Hey,
mailbox.
Dave, I'll drop them off at your house this evening.
That'd be all right.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta go right by, so I'll drop them off.
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
Mr. President,
Are we all right on this timeline, or do we?
Mr. President, I'd introduce a motion to accept the general manager's timeline as recommended.
I second it.
Second, discussion?
Now we can have some discussion.
Yes.
And I'm going to open the discussion with an observation. There is nothing in our bylaws that says that we have to give 30 days for a reply to a referendum vote. And this current schedule has this referendum vote coming back on 6 September, which on my calendar is right around a thing called Labor Day. People have a very bad habit of enjoying their weekends and their families and things like that, and kind of forgetting about things like mailing ballots and mailing materials back to us over that period of time. Secondly, as a continuing comment, my experience in the past has been that we basically, when we send out any kind of ballot, be it a regular board election or a referendum ballot or a bylaws question, take your pick, it normally comes back in two flights. We will see people responding within the first 2 weeks, then we'll see a hiatus with a few responses coming in, and then we'll see a last-minute flood of people who put it off till the last possible minute and let it go at that. What I'm getting to is, could we not, and I don't have a calendar in front of me, so I don't know where the weekend starts, but I'd kind of like to look at the end date as being the day before the Memorial Day weekend starts. Labor Day, I'm sorry, Labor Day, I do that all the time.
Friday before is the 31st of August.
I would suggest that we might consider the 31st of August as our cutoff date, or perhaps even the 30th.
Dan, I think that's an excellent idea.
Well, and the other consideration is that school goes back into session usually that last week of August, and once that happens,
Too many things going on, right?
yeah, it's too many things. People won't. It'll be underneath the school.
Would you
the
move
school
it
supplies.
earlier than the 31st of August?
No, I don't
31st
think so.
of May?
No, I think that you got to give them enough time. People to
But
get it.
we would then, and a couple things just to point out.
One thing at a time here, gentlemen. 31st.
I would go, I would modify my motion to
31st?
say the 31st
Couple things.
as the final return date.
Is that a modified motion?
No,
Yeah.
Tom's
yeah.
got to add something.
Just a couple things. If that's the case, then the receipt date would be by the 30th, which is Thursday.
Right.
We would then count the next day.
Right.
31st. Right.
Correct. Now, the only thing I want to make sure that everyone's aware of the fact, okay, by mailing out on the 10th, okay, getting to our local members a couple, 3 days. Getting to our distant membership, anybody that owns property that doesn't live here full time, it can take up to a week to get to them. Just throwing it out there. Okay, when we looked at this time frame, I'm not saying we're wrong, I'm just pointing it out. So if they're mailed the 10th, it'll get there 15, 16, 17 for our distant owners.
So they have 2 weeks.
So it gives them 2 weeks.
Okay? It's a week by the time they drop it in the mail and then it gets back, right?
But Bob, that's max. I mean, most will get it out of town in 3 days, most.
I'm just giving you
I
a time
understand.
frame.
You're giving us a heads up that it get.
I think-
If I can, let me ask a question here, because you've made your motion as to the 30th and 31st. Is there a second on this
Second.
motion? There's a second discussion now.
30th, right, Dan?
Yeah, 30.
Okay, what is help me understand the advantage of moving it from the 6th back to the 30th. Just help me understand the advantage. I'm not against it, but what's the
No,
what's the
I'm
advantage?
concerned that that on the starting Friday the 31st is the Labor Day weekend.
Right.
So people, and that's the 31st, 1st, 2nd, 3rd.
Right.
So it's doubtful that people are going to be mailing anything over that period of time, and it's certainly a guarantee that the post office isn't going to be carrying anything during that period of time.
Can I ask a question? Why not move it to the end of the Labor Day week? I
Well,
mean,
it
there are
already
people
is.
who are on vacation in the last week
It
of
is.
August.
Well,
That's fine, that's Dan.
Hey,
that
Dave,
was-
you don't have the calendar in front of you, and I understand that. It is currently at the end of that week.
May I?
Yes, Terry, go ahead.
Okay. I also think that there may be some people who come down on Labor Day weekend, and they may actually bring their ballot with them, and because maybe they have a question and they stop in to see Bob or somebody before they even make their check off. You know, a lot of people who own out of town places come on those major holidays like next week, and you know, I don't see any reason to change it, but.
Okay.
Just my opinion.
I just wanted to have the discussion. I wanted to make sure that the spread and dates, because actually part of the reason is that this afternoon there was also this morning, an election committee meeting to which I'm the liaison, and we were discussing this particular subject. And they expressed some concern about taking it over the Labor Day weekend. I think, man, your point is the cogent one, and that is that there are people who do come down here for that weekend and may well bring their ballots with them to drop it off. I had not thought of that, nor had the election committee. That's an extremely good observation. So, you know, I would be perfectly comfortable withdrawing my motion and hearing another one just to approve it as it stands.
Ray, you have your hand up.
I make a motion to approve it as it stands, as Bob written it. That gives people an extra week.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Pete seconded.
Comment.
Good.
I mean, the objective here, we're all trying to seek the best response possible, right?
Right.
That's all we're trying to do. And so whatever seems to work best is what we ought to support. And I don't know. I mean,
I think
we're guessing, but
I think the comment from
Terry.
Labor Day.
from your left wing, sir,
My left
was
wing.
very, very good.
I am not left wing.
but that's the objective. And so Terry's
That's twice
All right.
today he's
Terry's
called me
got
left wing.
So,
All right.
yeah, okay, so the motion.
Consider this a gavel. I'll call the question. All those in favor of the timeline as presented? Aye.
Aye.
Dave, where's your hand, up or down?
Up.
Okay.
Okay.
7-0.
7-0.
Thank you very much.
Good discussion, Dan.
Okay, public comment. Spin around. Joe.
We got a motion.
Joe Reynolds, 84
Right.
Watertown Road. What was Harkin's final level bid amount? Do you have that handy?
I do. Ask your others, I'll have it here, Joe.
One thing I wanted to ask, I guess at this point, and maybe this shouldn't be public comments at this point, but we've talked about slab on grade here. the elevation, the ground elevation at the parking lot where the handicap spaces are, they're closest to the yacht club, is up approximately 7 foot, let's see, plus 7. It's not just a question of getting above flood level. There's two issues. One is a county permit issue on elevation. The second is insurance requirements if you want insurance in the floodplain. So that's important because how far that building's elevated is going to do something to the cost of the flood.
Mr. President?
2.5 feet above flood level.
Permission to set aside the standing order so that we might respond to a couple of these?
Sure.
Because some of this was covered, Joe, you may not have noticed it in the chart that Bob went through earlier, but Harkins is talking about slab on grade 2.5 feet above flood level.
What's flood level elevation?
I have no idea what
That's
that
right,
is,
that's
but
what I mean,
they're
that's
talking
what I
about,
mean.
but they're,
Joe,
if
FEMA is
it's
7 feet, is it not?
but if
FEMA
it's
7
7
feet?
feet, they're talking about
7
being
feet.
9.5 feet.
It's no big deal.
It's a good point.
It's a good point.
It's a good point. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And finally, since you made this decision, I think there should be another motion. And this could be critical for reducing the price.
I'm sorry,
This could be critical for reducing the price of this project.
the height or the?
There's a group, no, critical, that my next suggestion is critical.
I got you, critical.
There's a group playing at the yacht club tonight. How many people here know who's playing? Tear the roof off. Let's take them at their word.
Yeah, can we, I want to give you your answer to your first question.
Sure, thank you.
When we leveled the bids, we were at $3,784,130.
For Harkins?
Yes, now, let's go, hang on. When you add 265,000 is our contingency. Remember, we had contingency that we're just building in. Okay, that brings us to 4,049,019. Then we add in, okay, all of the Ocean Pines, all the additional work that we identified. Example, sand fill, site plans, fuel storage, relocation, all those additional components. Okay, 235,800 brings a final price, 4,284,819.
Level.
Yes, but the Harkins contract is 3,784.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to make comment along with Joe was talking about. One of the
name and address, please.
Bruce McIntyre, 169 Moonshell Drive.
Thanks, Bruce.
One of the reoccurring problems in my current yacht club has been the underpinnings, the pilings. And so Joe's question about what is the proper elevation comes into bear. So as you talk about a slab and floodplain elevations and all this and that, it just seems to me you gotta dodge that piling problem finally. I mean, because it was a reoccurring, terribly expensive operation to go underneath an existing building to get it squared away.
Understand, just as a side note, that both, all the contractors was either poured foundation or slab, which does eliminate the piling issue for future. So that's a great point, and the bids included that, and Harkins had already pointed out.
You look at the geography, the topography.
Nobody
That-
suggested pilings, Bruce.
Say again.
No builder suggested pilings. They're not in the equation.
Pilings are not in the equation.
There are no pilings.
We're gone.
We got rid of it.
See, Bill, it's not at the same place at this one.
All right, okay.
I hear you. It's going to be the parking lot, right?
Okay.
But I'm just saying to you, if you look around those environs, you got a water hole between you and Route 90 that gets pretty deep sometimes, and it has a flow from time to time. And I don't know what terrible disaster may beset us, whether it be a 70-mile-an-hour windstorm which I have seen go through that arena, or we have, Al Gore saying that the war came in and he forced us all away. But I'm just saying to you, I think you have to consider this elevation situation very seriously, and you might end up being different dollar signs if you have to do it for some different kind of foundation.
We're not going back to violence, that's for sure.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Other comments? Okay. Comment or leave? I didn't read.
No. That's a question.
Okay.
Is there a final level bid for Lehman?
Yeah, it was already
Yeah.
Yeah, we did last.
These are available,
Same
right?
one from
Same from last week, yes.
Same
Was presented last week, right?
Any other public? Right, media.
Chip.
Last week, Bob recommended Lehman Brothers, and the bid came in at about 3.7, I believe, or 3.4. My question is that today the board unanimously approved a bid, a contractor that is almost $200,000 higher than what was recommended by the staff. And I'm curious as to why, or what the board's motivation, what the thought process was to do that.
Sure. I'll suspend the rules. Dan, if you want to respond. I can.
One quick response from me, sir, and it has 2 or maybe 3 points. Bob, when he made his presentation last week, was quite clear, I thought, in saying that the deciding factor on who he recommended at that point in time was the amount of design funding that was at risk. And therefore, he picked Lehman because of the lowest amount of design funding at risk, because we have to spend that money up front in order to go to referendum on a final building. What you don't know is that in discussions in the past week, certainly with a few of us, both Ted and Bob, when asked point blank the question, who can build this building comfortably, both answered Lehman or Harkins are acceptable builders.
How do you define comfort?
Both of them, I guess comfortably is the wrong word. Let me say competent to build the building. Either way, when asked by me directly on a one-to-one personal basis, both Ted and Bob said if I had to spend my own money, not the association's money, to build this building for my purposes, I would pick Harkins.
Okay.
Thank you.
Pete, I'm going to go next.
Okay,
I'm going to go to you. I'm going to make sure are you done?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, all right. Get to you in a second, Dave. Get to you in a second. The other rationale I stated earlier wasn't a hint, but it was really a statement in my case, is I am a firm believer that the design group that is working to build the right solution for what is needed needs to have the freedom to be able to be creative and do that kind of thing. And when I looked at the designs, to me, it was obvious Harkins was far ahead in that sense of being able to respond to the needs and be able to do that. I'm not saying that the others couldn't have done it, but I lean that way because I believe the design solution team needs to be able to meet our needs more specifically without being driven by necessarily an engineering folk who may or may not want to do something. Pete?
Yeah, I went through, I think, a process similar to what probably most board members did. Went through the books independently myself, and then got together to flesh out my questions and so forth. Bob was very, very helpful. We spent a couple hours together. For me, the design was really the key thing. AWB, their submission as part of the Harkins proposal was, to me, very impressive in terms of their responses to the questions, their presentation. I felt they clearly distinguished their engineering, architectural design capability, irrespective of the independence question that is also very, very important to me. I think we as an association will be far better served by an architectural engineering design firm that is independent rather than an in-house. With all due respect, but secondly, the nature of the projects and the volume of the business of Lehman contrasted with Harkins is quite different. Harkins does about $40 million of construction a year. In response to the questions put out by the RFP, Lehman, the response, 6.3 million, I believe, is the number they cited in their materials submitted as part of the proposal, is their average annual volume in the last 3 years. So in one case, you've got a firm that's doing $40 million worth of business a year. We're talking about a $4 million project. Another one does $6 million a year, and we're talking about a $4 million project. So a combination of factors, including most specifically the AWB superiority, I believe, of what they would bring to the association in terms of the architectural and engineering design capability, contrasted also with the experience construction-wise, and I know some of my fellow board members pointed out some of their projects, and including this one, by the way. I'm not an architect or an engineer, but to me this is sort of a shell-type project where it's not as complex as a restaurant or a yacht club. Okay, so the yacht club, in my mind, is a more complex project than this building here. And if you look at the base of experience they have, the projects they cited, I think the Harkins projects better supports what we're trying to do, Joe.
Okay, let me call on Dave. Dave?
Yeah, there's a bunch of things that all were fairly strong. One is, I met with Dan, and I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback. I'll give you this. I met with Dan, and Dan and I met on Sunday morning with Bob
and Ted.
Yeah, good old one. And at any rate, we went through, after I had the clear idea that Harkins is the best in their minds. I mean, I think I went back through the week and I looked at the proposals, Lehman's, I looked at the drawings, I looked at when they were submitted. I mean, Lehman's original proposal, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it missed the fact that they had been told in an addendum to enclose the front floor. When you look at the plus up in Lehman's proposal, it's the entire first floor. The other thing is, I mean, we have history with Lehman, and some of it is very, very good. People have asked me, why wouldn't you if you did this good job on the community center? And I think Steve Porter did it, and I said this during the Sunday meeting. The yacht club's an order of magnitude more complex. And lastly, a large part of that is in design. We've already had a lot of people in the room won't remember that we gave a Lehman time to build. They did, and they submitted it. But I can tell you that I never ran into one person who said, boy, this is really great, that's beautiful stuff. I had a lot of issues with whether or not they're the same team that they did then would be able to come out with something that's beautiful, that will really, really like. Now, whether or not Harkins can or not, I don't know. But at least I think they have a fair shot at it.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Bill, go ahead.
Like Tom, this is based on my personal experience. It involved the $25 million construction facility. It's much better for the design people, the architects, to drive the construction as opposed to the construction people. The architects are going to be creative and do what is in the best interest and get the most out of the facility, as the construction end of it is looking to what is easiest for them to do with less complications.
I have just a quick clarification.
Make sure that, see if Ray and Terry want to add anything, because I think that's a good question that we owe the answer. We should respond just to answer that question. Terry?
No, I'm good.
Ray, okay?
Just direct answer your questions. Bob doesn't always get his way.
Let me just chip in one last comment. He asked me to be quick, and I will be. I give Bob and Ted credit for this because they made it very clear they were really trying to save us risk and money by their ordering of the recommendations 1, 2. They made it very clear that they could go with either one, but the tipping point, I believe, as you said to me and to the public, was this upfront cost and the risk factor. So I applaud them for trying to do that. I think we as a board are saying we understand that, but in the scheme of the magnitude of what we're talking about, we'd rather spend a little more money, take a little more risk, to make sure we have a better chance of being truly successful. So, is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Chip. Did we answer that question pretty well?
I think you did, but it did raise another question.
Sure.
From Dan's answer. Based on what you said, do you feel that Gillis Gilkerson is incompetent to do the yacht club?
That's a gotcha question.
That's
the question.
No, that's a very good question, and the answer to that is I don't know, and that's my problem. We have in the leveling process, and Bob or Ted, you stop me if I'm wrong, but in the leveling process alone, that was very good. You added nearly $1 million to their original bid price.
We added a lot of money in there.
And that's still
holes in the bid. For instance, we had an RFI that specifically called to meet the 2012 energy code. They bid it with the 2009 energy code. It's a design build building. We can't go through and try to find everything that was missed. You know, there were a lot. If you looked at the presentation last week, there were a lot of adds. They can build the building. The question is, what are you getting, and how much do you have to keep adding in to try to find the holes? And that's really what it boiled down to, is that it's easier for us to take Hardwick and Lehman and squeeze them down than it is to keep adding stuff, because the more things you start adding in there, then the rule of unintended consequences come. You add a canopy on the front of the building that they didn't have. Their original design did not have a set of stairs when you walked into that building. To get to the second floor of that building, you either took the elevator or you had to walk around on the side towards the Mumford Pool side, which is the less attractive side of that building, obviously, to get in, rather than even around to the other side between where we had all the deck. So there were a lot of aesthetic design things. When they went back, I'll give you one more. When they went back and redesigned and added the kitchen, we asked specifically that the kitchen upstairs be the bigger kitchen, because that was going to be the prep kitchen. It is the smallest of all of the kitchens there, and it's not big enough for us to even run the banquet part out of it. So there's a lot of, they're a qualified contractor, but the bid did not meet what we needed to do.
Yeah,
there's a real difference in there. They can build a building, but so nobody's calling them incompetent. We're saying the bid did not measure up in comparison to the other two in terms of quality, layout, aesthetics, and inclusion.
Dan, is that what you were?
Not quite. The competence, I'm still not sure about. These gentlemen have a much more educated opinion than I do. The confidence I am quite sure about. I was not confident based upon what I heard and what I saw that Gillis Gilkerson could handle this project.
Okay. Pete, you want to
Yeah,
add
Chip, I think revealing in the details of the proposal, when they responded to various questions these gentlemen raised, their response, and I have two of them right here on page 4 of their response, and it says as follows. And to make changes to the building to bring it as close to the budget as possible. Close to the budget. Now, what budget? Here in question number 8, it refers to the approach, we are making changes to the building to bring it as close to the budget as possible. In other words, I believe they had a 2.5, they did. They understood based on public hearings and maybe some other, that 2.5 was the number. It's my personal opinion, based on this response and the quality of the submission, that they were trying to hit a 2.5 number right here.
Thank you
I
very
think,
much.
yeah, I'm going to close this part out
Okay.
by simply adding, in a prior life, I ran RFPs for a Fortune 5 company. And at the end of the day, as we voted earlier, and Dave correctly suggested that we add, we're making these decisions based on the information provided to us by these builders. The reality is we had to make the decision on what they submitted. And in my opinion, as Pete has pointed out, we have selected a builder who did a very fine job of responding to this RFP very thoroughly, completely, obviously with a level of energy that was very good. So, any other questions?
Thank you for your response.
Okay.
I have a question. Good question. The contractor that you
Name and address, please.
Joe Giacopinello, 26 Federal Hill in the park. The contractor you selected, this person would assume overall responsibility. We're talking about subcontractors,
Yeah.
permits,
Yes.
The whole, if something goes wrong, you go there, everybody licensed, insured, bonded, the whole routine. Okay, yes. Second question, I'm sorry, I apologize, I came a little late, but I saw on your little screen, $26 assessment. What is that?
That's the last year of the 5-year plan to pay for all of this, and that's next year.
That's-
After that, there are no additions.
Us guys,
Yeah, we've all been paying. Yeah.
$26.
Extra next year, and that's it.
Multiplied by 5, and after the 5th year, it goes on at that 5 times 26, $100-some.
But there are no
I'm going to offer to sit down afterwards, and because we've been through that, but be more than happy to explain what the basically message was. We already have the funding mechanism in place within the organization to pay for this. We do not need any kind of special billing or anything like that to happen. But a lot of that will be explained in the referendum package that goes out. I'd be more than happy to talk to you after the meeting. Any other questions?
President, I move to adjourn.
Second?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Dave, drive safe. Thank you.
He's probably already home.
He's in his driveway.
Okay.
Let's do business.